winter of 2003, my friend Sarah and I took off a day to go cross-country skiing in Banff National Park. We've both been skiing for years, downhill and cross-country, and we always prefer areas that are away from the busier, groomed trails, so that day we did the House Pass Trail. House Pass isn't really a big ski trail. It's used more in the summer and it's not groomed or marked for cross-country, so you kind of have to know where you're going, and that was part of the appeal for us. It's about a 12-kilometer out and back that we knew would be empty, and it's such a beautiful area with some sections in the forest and others that have huge open views of the mountains. We got out there in the morning starting just off the Icefields Parkway with about a 100-meter ski into the trailhead. After going a few kilometers and a little bit past the Mistaya River, we came to an open meadow. While we were making our way across the side of the meadow, we saw something so strange we had to ski over to it. In one part of the meadow, there was a huge patch of snow melted all the way down to the bare ground. This is Banff in the winter. Everything is covered in snow, but this huge area had none. We skied up to it and it looked like the snow had melted completely down to the ground and left this almost meter-high snow wall around the edge of it. Everything else was covered solid, but this was clear. It got even more perplexing when we went around it because we got onto a small hill slightly above it and both noticed that it had a very defined square shape to it. You wouldn't need to know a thing about nature to know that this was not natural or random. Perfect squares like that rarely happen naturally. The size of it was huge too. The foundation or a footprint of a large building could have fit inside. It truly looked like a giant hot iron had come down and just melted that shape into the ground. We really didn't have any words for it. Sarah took her skis off and got down into one side of it while I stayed up above on the hill looking around for any clues that might hint at what caused it. The ground wasn't even muddy or icy, it was dry, no different than if you were walking around on it in the fall. We didn't see any footprints in the snow, no animal tracks. There was no sign of anything out there, and the perimeter of the snow was clean and solid. We stayed there for 15 or 20 minutes but couldn't come up with anything, so we kept going down the trail. We made it to the House River, which is about 6 kilometers in from the parkway, then turned around. Since we went back the way we came, we passed the same spot again and stopped for a last look but still had no idea what caused it. Sarah and I never forgot about that day, but we also didn't make a big deal out of it. I remember bringing it up to other cross-country friends a time or two to see if anyone had ever seen anything like that or had an idea of why it was out there, but that was really it. It took years for me to realize what we might have actually stumbled on. In 2008, 5 years after Sarah and I had skied that trail, my boyfriend and I went out and did the same trail. I told him what happened when Sarah and I were out there, so we were actually looking for it that time. When we got to the same meadow, it was perfectly normal and covered in snow. There was nothing out of the ordinary, and it made me think that what we saw was just a fluke. Maybe it had been some kind of natural snowmelt. It was even more years after that, though, that I really started to question it, because around 2010 or 2011, Sarah's doctor sent her into a dermatologist for a spot on the front of her ankle. After going in, she ended up having melanoma removed and they took a pretty big chunk out of her skin. Not long after that, maybe another year, she was back in for 2 spots of basal cell carcinoma on her other leg. That time it was down at the bottom of her calf. Even now, she has another one she's dealing with as I write this. Luckily, all of it has been successfully treated and removed so far, but it makes me wonder why she started getting these cancerous skin issues all of a sudden, and all on the bottoms of her legs. Call me paranoid, but when we saw that melted patch of snow in 2003, she was the one that took her skis off and went down into it to walk around for 15 minutes. I stayed up on the snow hill and away from it the whole time. Then 10 years later, she starts getting all of these spots and skin cancers on her ankles and legs. I could be overthinking, but I have a feeling it has something to do with her walking in and around that thing. Maybe there was some kind of radiation there. For all I know, it was a natural phenomenon. I'm not a scientist. The square shape of it isn't consistent with anything natural though, and that makes me think of other more conspiracy-type explanations. Things like secret government testing and aliens come to mind, but who knows? Whatever it was only seemed to be there for a short time, and I'm not saying Sarah's skin cancer is related to it, but I will say one thing. I'm glad I didn't take my skis off and follow her that day. I always joke that the DMV is a place where time goes to die. You go in for something that should only take 5 minutes, yet somehow 3 or 4 hours vanish without a trace. But last year, something happened when I was at my local DMV that made that joke feel a little too real. Before I get into it, I want to mention 2 things. The first one is, this happened on Friday, May 10th, 2024 in Eugene, Oregon. And the second one is, on the night of this experience, we had an extremely rare episode of northern lights over the whole state that everyone was talking about and posting online. It was all over the news here because you could see the aurora borealis just about anywhere in Oregon that night, especially if you were mildly away from light pollution. My family and I saw it, and it was amazing. I don't know if this has anything to do with what I'm about to tell you, but it was definitely strange timing. That morning, I had taken part of the day off work to deal with a title transfer because my wife and I had just paid off her car. When I got to the DMV, it was already stupid busy with people. As soon as I got a number, a lady working there said it would probably be a 2-hour wait. Since you can now leave and check what number they're on from your phone, I decided to get a coffee and walk around so I didn't have to sit there. There's a breakfast restaurant not too far away from their building, so I walked over there and got a coffee to go, then was going to walk for a while to kill time. Right behind the DMV, there's a nice walking path that runs along the Willamette River. It has open parts and forested parts and basically just follows the river for as long as you want to go. I figured I'd walk until my coffee was gone, then come back when they were close to my number. Everything about that morning and my walk was totally normal. There were a handful of other people jogging and biking and a couple of folks walking dogs, but absolutely nothing out of the ordinary. It was a nice, quiet spring day. I drank my coffee and checked my phone a few times, and that was about it. I wasn't gone long, maybe 45 minutes tops, then I headed back to the DMV. When I walked back inside, I looked up at the screen and saw that they had already passed my number. Not barely either, they were well past it. I could not believe I had missed my turn, and to put it mildly, I wasn't happy. I was sure I had timed it right, but thought maybe they were freakishly efficient that day. I saw the same lady and told her I'd missed my number, but all she could do for me was tell me to take a new one, so I did. I sat down with my empty coffee cup still in my hand, very irritated, and pulled out my phone. I don't know what happened, but it was almost 2 hours later than I thought it was. I just stared at the time, cross-checking it with the DMV clock and trying to figure out how that could be right. I had gotten there right after they opened, so just after 8 a.m. Then I left to get coffee and walk, which couldn't have taken more than an hour in total. But as I sat there in that horribly uncomfortable plastic chair, all the clocks around me were saying it was 11:30 in the morning, when in my mind it should have been about 9:30. It was a jarring feeling. A whole chunk of the morning disappeared. I consider myself level-headed, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't put me on edge and have me concerned about my health, or at least my mental health. I still stayed and waited for my turn though. Eventually, I got up to the counter and got everything taken care of, but the whole time I felt distracted and disoriented. I had never experienced anything like that. When I walked out the door to leave, the first thing I saw were 2 guys with beat-up bikes sitting on the curb next to my car. I could tell right away they were homeless because they both looked rough and had backpacks next to them. I tried to not even make eye contact with them, then I walked over to my car and unlocked it. I was opening the door and almost made it in when, of course, one of them said something to me. I didn't hear him the first time, so I had to ask him what he said. Then he repeated it and asked me, "Did you see the reset?" I can't tell you how not in the mood I was for this. Even though I had heard what he said, it was nonsense and I didn't want to talk to him. I wanted to keep them both cool while I got in the car, so I just told them I didn't know. Then he asked me again if I saw the reset happen. His friend chimed in and started talking too, both of them going back and forth over each other about how a reset had just happened. I had no clue what they were talking about, so I asked them what they meant, and the guy who I had talked to first stood up and was waving his arms while he talked about it, and this is what I got out of it. He said there was a reset, and from what I could tell, he meant it as in we're living in a simulation and part of it was changed or started over. He said they had seen it happen before, but this one happened earlier that morning. Then he went on about how we're all stuck in this fake world that's controlled by super intelligent beings. While I was standing there listening to this, I could only think of one thing: stay off drugs, kids. I was trying to stay polite, basically just nodding and pretending to care, but then he said that this reset lasted almost 2 hours. I guess it was long enough for them to ride around and watch people and see things happen. His friend nodded along, agreeing with every word, and it got my real attention. The guy standing up told me to be careful out there, like they were giving me some kind of warning. Then they went back to whatever they were doing. Neither of them asked me for money or anything like that, so I just got in my car, gave the guys a wave, and left. I'm used to seeing homeless and strung-out addicts around town. I live in a city in Oregon. Unfortunately, that's what we're known for now. But at the same time, what are the odds of someone like that rambling on about a 2-hour glitch in the simulation on the same morning I'd felt something eerily similar happen? I'll be honest, it kind of blew my mind while I was heading to work. I actually turned around and drove back through the parking lot. I don't even know what I had planned to do. Maybe ask them more about it or tell them I had lost a chunk of time too. Unfortunately, they had already taken off, so I never got the chance to add my crazy to theirs. I don't talk about this very often for obvious reasons. I'm also not someone who believes in simulation theories. I'm pretty sure we live in a real world with real things. I do, however, think something happened, and I'll never say the timing of it wasn't perfect. That morning, the hours got away from me and I don't know how, but I'll be damned if those guys didn't show up at just the right moment to really mess with my head. In 2006, one of my best friends, Robbie, invited me up to Victoria, BC for a long weekend. We grew up in the same neighborhood in Paulsbo, Washington, and he had moved up to Canada in 2005 to be with his girlfriend, who is Canadian and now his wife. We hadn't seen each other that whole year, and he's like a brother to me, so I was excited to hang out with him for a few days. The reason he asked me to come up was because he had gotten his girlfriend's family's second home for the weekend. I don't know if they use it as a rental or what, but this house is an old waterfront home in the James Bay area that faces out over the water with a full view of the Olympic Mountains. If it's clear, you can see that whole section of Washington from the front balcony. We pretty much just hung out that first day, catching up while he showed me around downtown Victoria. We had dinner at this awesome waterfront restaurant called Milestones, then brought beer back to the house and were sitting out on the balcony. This was when something caught our attention. Out over the water, maybe halfway across between Victoria and the US, we saw a single blue light that looked like it was just sitting there. Boats are everywhere up there, so originally that's what we thought it was, but we started to question that because it didn't look like it was actually on the water. It looked like it was above it. We watched this thing stay perfectly still for 10 or 15 minutes, still talking and not thinking that much about it until it lifted straight up fairly high and stopped mid-air. It had to be a few hundred feet above the water then, so it definitely wasn't a boat. This really got our curiosity going, and Robbie grabbed this pair of binoculars that were sitting inside on the windowsill. In my mind, it had to be a helicopter. We took turns using them and looking at it, trying to figure out what it was because we couldn't see anything other than the light. It didn't have a body or wings. While Robbie had the binoculars, we both saw the light make a single pulse where it got brighter for a second, then dimmed back down. To my naked eye, it just looked like it blinked, no big deal, but Robbie said something wasn't right. Through the binoculars, he said the pulse we saw looked like a wave of energy or light that went around this thing from bottom to top, creating an outline of what was actually out there that, in his words, looked like a much larger aircraft. After that happened, there was an obvious change and we could see that it was moving toward the mountains on the US side. We handed the binoculars back and forth so many times because as it was moving away from us, we could easily see a glow underneath it, almost like a jet engine might look, except for the fact that what was coming out of it had a green-blue color to it. I remember asking if it was a float plane that might be on fire or having problems, but Robbie said there was no possible way it was a float plane. There just wasn't a shape that we could make out. It had no flashing lights and it was still moving up and away from us in a controlled way. I couldn't tell you how much time went by, but we spent quite a while watching it move around in the sky. The more we watched it, the more confused we were. We could not figure out what we were looking at. In one perfectly smooth motion, it dropped all the way back down to the water, then shot up again and took off, heading straight toward the Olympic Mountains in the distance. We were actually sitting on the edges of our seats while we followed it with the binoculars, and that's when it did something you would have had to see to believe. It flew straight into the side of one of the mountains. I don't mean it went behind or above or around. I had the binoculars locked onto it when it happened, and it flew right into the broad face of a mountain, and then I watched the light go out. There's a main road that runs between the front of the house we were in and the water. I think it's called Dallas Road if you want to see where this happened. But we ran across the street to a sidewalk and a lookout area and stood there speechless. I was the lucky one who saw it up close, but even Robbie said it looked like it had crashed into the side of the peak, and he only saw it with his eyes. We stayed out there forever, scanning the horizon and hoping to see anything else happen, but nothing did. Robbie and I have told this story so many times to so many people, and we always hear it was just our perspective that made it look like it went into the mountain, when it most likely went in between peaks, like an optical illusion. I might believe this if we hadn't been watching the whole thing with a good pair of binoculars. If we had only seen it with our eyes, it would still be crazy, but sure, I would question that. I personally saw the light go into the side of a mountain. I mean into it too, as if there was a hatch or an opening that just let it fly in. I don't know how else to describe it. That's what happened. The only thing we've ever been able to come up with is what we saw was an experimental aircraft, possibly doing something with the Coast Guard since it was mostly over the water. The truth is, neither of us have ever seen anything fly like that or go straight into the side of a mountain range. I don't really care what other people think though. I don't think it was a plane. I could also swear the thing came out of the ocean because it seemed to just show up. For years, this has been a one-of-a-kind sighting that Robbie and I share. I know he told his wife's family about it and they all thought it was incredible. They've owned that house for decades and love watching boats, but they've never seen anything like what we saw. I guess we just happened to be in the right place at the right time. I want to thank everyone for watching another episode of Skywatcher Stories. If you like hearing these personal experiences of strange sightings and alien encounters, please subscribe because I upload new episodes every week and it really helps the channel. Until next time, keep watching the skies.